Today on Corrupt Crimes, an angel of mercy becomes the angel of death.
This coward is victimizing our most vulnerable citizens.
Investigators suspect that the murderer is someone who appears to his victims to be their caretaker.
This is possibly America's most prolific mass murderer.
We'll probably never know just how many people he murdered.
Livingston, New Jersey. Saturday, June 11th, 1988. Inside the St. Barnabas Medical Center, a patient is dying. John W. Yango Sr. was a municipal court judge in Jersey City and twice ran for mayor.
He's in a medical center, so he's expecting people to watch out for him, take care of him.
John Yango leaves behind 3 daughters and a son.
Yango succumbs to a rare allergic reaction called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. A painful purple rash and blisters follow flu-like symptoms.
Stevens-Johnson syndrome is most often a severe reaction to an infection or sometimes a medication.
No one realizes that the actual reason Yango has died is because of a lethal dose of an intravenous medication.
Yango is known as Maximum John.
If a bad guy had a grudge against anyone, it would be Judge Yango.
In 2.5 years, 10 more die at St. Barnabas Medical Center under suspicious circumstances. Administrators launch an investigation.
They suspect contaminated IV bags.
And then the suspicious deaths seem to fade away.
It's hard to determine at first what deaths are suspicious and what deaths are not.
55 miles away in Phillipsburg, New Jersey on August 30th, 1993, 91-year-old Helen Dean makes it through breast cancer surgery at Warren Hospital.
Any 91-year-old who makes it through surgery is one tough cookie.
I'm glad you're okay.
I told you I would be.
Their plan is to discharge her to a nursing home.
A nurse enters her room and asks her son to leave.
Don't go far, though.
Oh, I won't.
When the son, Larry, comes back into the room, his mom tells him that a nurse gave her an injection.
The next day, within hours of arriving at a nursing home, Helen Dean passes away.
Larry is convinced that his mom dies from a lethal injection.
Larry Dean persuades the county prosecutor and medical examiner to investigate.
The autopsy specifically looks for 100 different toxic chemicals and finds not one.
Nurses who have contact with Helen Dean or who had access to her take a polygraph exam. They all pass.
The DA drops the case for lack of evidence. There are 2 more murders of elderly patients at Warren Hospital, but no one notices.
These are vulnerable people, hardly in a position to defend themselves.
Patients at Warren may need a drug at any given moment, so healthcare professionals there have easy access to a wide variety of medications.
In 1996, 5 people are murdered at the Hunterdon Medical Center in Raritan Township, New Jersey.
As big a tragedy as these deaths are, it's just as big a tragedy that no one even notices. This is perhaps the most insidious aspect of this case.
The cardiac and intensive care unit are filled with gravely ill patients. Many are unconscious. Death is expected. The nursing staff is largely unsupervised.
On May 8, 1998, an ambulance transports Francis J. Henry, barely clinging to life, from Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center to Lehigh Valley Hospital.
The hospital staff struggles mightily to save his life. His blood sugar is dropping to dangerously low levels, a symptom of insulin overdose.
Henry, suffering a variety of ailments, should not be taking insulin.
The hospital calls the rehab center, demanding to know what's going on. Why on earth is someone giving this patient insulin?
The nurse caring for Henry, Kimberly Pepe, insists she never gives Henry insulin. Pepe works the overnight shift. She tells her supervisors that this particular nurse could have done it. In 1999, Pennsylvania coroner Zachary Lysek presents evidence to officials that an employee of Easton Hospital may be murdering patients.
They do an autopsy on a patient named Ottomer Schramm. It reveals the patient died of an overdose of a medication called digoxin.
This is a medication that no one would have prescribed for a man in his condition.
Officials look into the suspicious death, but come up with nothing.
At this point, the system isn't even set up to catch healthcare workers who mean to do harm to their patients.
At Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey, 8 patients are murdered.
It had to happen eventually. Someone finally begins to connect the dots.
One November night in 2003, nurse Amy Loughran has doubts about a few patients' deaths.
Amy is a bright woman. She keeps her eyes open.
Amy finds the pharmacy is sending over a long list of bizarre drug combinations.
Sometimes there are as many as a half dozen of these unorthodox drug cocktails in a single night.
It doesn't add up, especially since the nurse who orders these drugs is a friend of Amy.
These are drugs used in a cardiac unit, not an intensive care unit. Amy's friend works in intensive care.
This particular nurse always takes delivery of the drugs from the pharmacy. Amy has always thought he's just being helpful. Now, she's not so sure.
Amy feels something's wrong, but it's beyond belief to imagine her friend is guilty of any wrongdoing.
Amy takes a look at the computer system Cerner. Cerner keeps track of patients and dispenses drugs. What Amy discovers shocks her. Coming up, the unmasking of a murderer. Investigators suspect this man may have murdered 400 people or more. It's July 2003. Police warn Somerset Medical Center administrators that a nurse may be murdering their patients. Nurse Amy Loughran has doubts about this particular nurse.
Amy takes a look at the computer entries for her colleague, a night shift nurse.
This guy seems okay, a former Navy man, served on a submarine.
Amy sees that Charles Cullen's entries are minimal at best, riddled with misspellings.
She knows he's on the computer all the time. If he's not entering notes, what is he doing?
Amy calls the police. Tim Braun and Danny Baldwin are 2 Somerset detectives investigating several suspicious patient deaths.
Ms. Loughran.
The detectives are concerned because the victims have lethal doses of a particular drug in their systems. The drug, digoxin.
She takes her computer printouts to the 2nd floor of the prosecutor's office.
What do you have for us?
So I've been going through our patient files.
Amy shows the prosecutor that in the early hours of June 28th, Charles Cullen is browsing through the computer records for a patient admitted in critical condition, heart and kidney failure plus pneumonia.
His name is Reverend Florian Gall. He makes a miraculous recovery, and the plan is to discharge him.
Since Cullen has no contact with many of these patients, Amy suspects he may be adding drugs to their IV bags.
The nurses make up all their IV bags, and they store them in an area close to where Cullen works.
Amy figures Cullen tampers with the IV bags with lethal doses of drugs, then leaves it up to unsuspecting nurses to carry out his murderous plan.
He's leaving it up to people who are actually there to do good to become unwitting accessories to murder.
Amy reasons that with the drugs Cullen is somehow injecting into his victims, he doesn't have to be present in order to watch them die.
He can read the hospital charts for a moment-by-moment account of the patient's death.
Gall was not one of Cullen's patients. Yet Cullen logs onto the computer at 6:28 a.m. 30 minutes after Gall's lab work shows a reaction to digoxin. Then, Cullen checks in a minute after that.
Keep in mind, this is all circumstantial evidence.
Cullen keeps checking in every few minutes until the digoxin coursing through Gall's veins causes cardiac arrest at 9:32. The digoxin stops his heart altogether at 10:47 a.m.
The computer records thousands of Cullen's logins, sometimes hundreds of them per night.
State officials hit Somerset Hospital with a penalty for failing to report a non-fatal overdose of insulin. Administered by Charles Cullen.
Somerset Medical fires Cullen on Halloween Day 2003.
The police focus their investigation on Charles Cullen, but it moves at a snail's pace. The police need hard evidence.
Investigators throw a Hail Mary pass and ask Amy to wear a hidden wire. She agrees.
Amy meets Cullen, where he shows her 5 newspaper clippings of the murders.
She says that he behaves as if he's somehow proud of this.
Amy tells him what she thinks.
I know you did it. I saw the evidence. I saw the patient files. I want you to come to the police station and confess.
I'm not going down that fight.
Coming up, even if police get their man, will they be able to hold him?
All they have is circumstantial evidence.
Amy meets Cullen in a cafe.
I know you did it.
He says he wants to go down fighting.
Police enter the restaurant and arrest Charles Cullen on December 12, 2003, on suspicion of murdering Reverend Florian Gall. Once police arrest Charles Cullen, he will not cooperate. He won't even answer a yes or a no question.
They believe in their gut that this is the guy, but all they have is circumstantial evidence.
As a last-ditch effort, they ask Amy Loughran to talk to Charles. Maybe she can get through.
Amy says he's going to drag his daughters through the trial, and her too.
What happened to Reverend Gall?
Cullen admits that he killed him, and he did it by giving him digoxin.
Now, Amy asks who the first person he murdered was. Cullen says he'll talk under one condition.
He may not have given a damn about anyone else's life, but he sure gives a damn about his own.
Cullen cuts a deal. He helps the police track down the rest of his victims in exchange for removing the possibility of capital punishment.
All right, Charles. If you're willing to give us what we want, we'll agree to life.
What do you want to know?
Cullen admits to killing 40 patients.
Cullen talks with the police for 7 hours.
The police see that the murders follow his employment. For instance, he quits St. Barnabas when they begin an investigation into tainted IV bags.
He quickly gets another job at Warren Hospital for a hard-to-fill position on the night shift. The murders that ended at St. Barnabas now start up here.
Police also learn about his dysfunctional marriage of 6 years that bears 2 daughters.
He refuses to talk to his wife. He doesn't sleep with her for years.
She accuses him of animal cruelty, of awakening to her barking Yorkshire Terrier that Charles had actually zipped into a bowling bag.
In January 1983, his wife files for divorce.
He loses custody of his daughters and actually moves into a basement apartment.
In March, Cullen becomes obsessive about a co-worker, Michelle Tomlinson. He stalks her.
He actually tries to give her an engagement ring, and he phones her constantly.
In the pre-dawn hours of March 23, 1983, Cullen breaks the window of Tomlinson's kitchen door and enters her home, while Tomlinson and her 6-year-old son sleep.
He's arrested for trespassing.
Cullen pleads guilty to misdemeanor trespassing and receives a year probation. Less than 3 weeks after he breaks into Tomlinson's home, he murders Helen Dean.
What is that?
On April 29, 2004, Cullen pleads guilty to 13 murders and 2 attempted murders at Somerset Medical Center.
Do you wish to plead guilty this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes, Your Honor.
In May, he pleads guilty to another 3 patient killings in New Jersey. Some authorities even believe that the true number of murders Cullen committed could be as high as 400.
He could be the most prolific murderer in U.S. history.
Cullen maintains that the motive behind these killings was to spare patients from being listed as a code blue, cardiac or respiratory arrest. He says he kills to end their suffering. Coming up, does this serial killer present an indictment against our entire healthcare system?
9 different companies employ Cullen. They even ask for job references, but not one of them ever receives an unfavorable report.
On KDOC TV, Los Angeles.
On April 29, 2004, Charles Cullen pleads guilty to 13 murders, plus 2 attempted murders at Somerset Medical Center.
Did you inject Ms. Stoker with any medication?
Yes.
And was it your intent to cause her to expire?
Yes.
In hindsight, investigators see that Cullen passed his polygraph exam in the Helen Dean investigation because he's a psychopath. Psychopaths are very good at lying. They lie to other people, and they lie to themselves, quite frankly. Over his nefarious career, he's fired for poor job performance and suspicion in unusual deaths. However, none of this information makes it to his prospective employers.
9 different companies employ Cullen. They even ask for job references, but not one of them ever receives an unfavorable report.
The reluctance of healthcare providers to pass along unfavorable references underscores a fundamental weakness in the healthcare system.
Employees are reticent about providing warnings regarding former employees because they're afraid of being sued.
Charles Cullen is litigious. He once sues a mental health facility where he is committed due to a suicide attempt because they draw blood for routine testing.
The reporting requirements are so rigid that it's unlikely they would apply to Cullen anyway.
Several hospitals where Cullen works say it's their policy not to say anything, positive or negative, about a former employee.
On 4 separate occasions, people have come forward to say that Cullen is killing patients.
Due to concerns about being sued, it is not in the healthcare corporation's financial interest to report suspicious deaths or suspect employees.
New Jersey detective Tim Braun claims that Somerset Medical Center lies to them during their investigation.
Braun and his partner Danny Baldwin asked Somerset officials for computer records from their drug dispensing system dating to Cullen's employment.
Somerset officials say computer records don't go back that far. The manufacturer of the computer system disputes this. On March 2, 2006, Cullen receives 11 consecutive life terms.
We'll never know how many he actually killed.
Charles Cullen is currently serving his sentence in the New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, with the possibility of parole in 397 years.